Hi guys, welcome to this video where we're going to be looking at factoring trinomials. And trinomials are just a polynomial with three terms. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do every time they tell you to factor, and it's a trinomial, again, look at the ordering of the terms. The exponents have to be in descending order. What I mean by that is the highest power first, followed by the next, and then lastly, a constant. And also, look at, do they have any coefficients? This is a coefficient. W, and there is a coefficient of 1 there. What I mean by a coefficient, real quick, before we get into this, is that if you have an unknown like x and you have a constant before the unknown like 9, so 9 is a coefficient of x. So look at the coefficients. Do they have any common factors? So the trick is, if you're given a trinomial, turn it into a polynomial with 4 terms, right? It's going to be the coefficient of the first term, yeah? To get the sum, it will be the middle coefficient, which is b. For example, looking at this example here, our is equal to 1, our b is equal to 9, and our c is equal to 18, right? So get the product. So to get the product, I will multiply a times c, so which is 1 times 18, and this will give you 18. And get the sum. The sum of that trinomial is a 9. Remember, the sum is just the middle term. Think of two numbers. So those two numbers, their product has to be 18, and their sum has to be 9. And those two numbers are 6 and 3. If you multiply 6 and 3, you get 18. If you add it, you get 9. Okay, so we're going to replace this middle term by these two numbers. Remember, we need to break down this trinomial to make it a polynomial with 4 terms. So I can rewrite this trinomial as w squared plus 3w plus 6w plus 18. The middle term, I'm replacing it with these two numbers in the unknown w. Okay, at this point, if you watched the previous video of factoring a polynomial with 4 terms, we're going to use the same concept. You're going to factor the first 2 terms alone, in fact, the last 2 terms alone. Looking at the first 2 terms, what is common? W. So if you factor out W, you'll be left with W plus 3. Looking at these last 2 terms, 6, 18, the greatest common factor is 6. So if you factor out 6, you'll be left with W plus 3. So remember, what you have in bracket here has to be the same, W plus 3, W plus 3. So we're on the right track. So you combine what is outside the bracket. So W plus 6 to W plus 3. So that is what you'll end up with. Again, guys, side note, this is a series of videos. Please first watch factoring polynomials with 4 terms and then come back to this. It will make more sense. Let's look at another example. We're having a c squared plus 4c minus 45. Get the product. And the product is a times c. Our b is 4, and our sum will be a 4. Now, what this means is, look for 2 numbers. If you multiply them, you get the product, which is minus 45. But if you add them, you get the sum, which is 4. Those 2 numbers will be 9 and 5. But to make a positive sum, 5 has to be negative, right? So 9 and 5 are those 2 numbers. If you multiply 9 times 5, you'll get negative 45. If you add them, you'll get a 4. But they have to be in C. So 9c and minus 5c. Why? Because this is c. It's in the unknown c. So after getting these 2 terms, they are going to replace the middle term. So we're going to write this as c squared minus 5c plus 9c minus 45. So here, we're going to apply our knowledge of factoring polynomials with 4 terms. You factor the first 2 terms alone and the last 2 terms alone. Looking at the first 2 terms, what is common is c. So factor out c, you'll be left with c minus 5. Looking at these last terms, the greatest common factor here is 9. So plus 9. If you factor out 9, what you'll be left with here will be c minus 5. Remember, at this point, what you have in parentheses has to be the same. So this will be the same as c plus 9, c minus 5. Well, sometimes you might be given a trinomial with a greatest common factor. What that means is, if you look at the coefficients, sometimes you need to factor out the coefficients. Okay, so what I mean by this is, here, looking at 3, negative 15, then you look at 12. You can break this 3 into 3 times 1. You can break this 15 into 3 times negative 5. You can break down this 12 into 3 times 4. So are you saying 3 is common? Factor out the 3. What you'll be left with will be y squared minus 5y plus 4. Okay, now let's apply our product and sum. The product is a times c, so the product is 4. And the sum is the middle term, which is minus 5. Which two numbers would we multiply together and get the product, which is 4, but then add them and get the sum, which is minus 5? Pause the video, think about those two numbers, negative 4 and negative 1. If you multiply negative 4 times negative 1, you'll get the product of 4. And if you add these, they'll give you a sum of minus 5. So these two numbers that you figured out are going to replace the middle term. So I'll start with 3. Don't forget this 3, very important. 3, I'll use these brackets and then use this y squared minus y plus 4. So at this point, all I'm going to do is factor the first two terms alone and factor the last two terms alone. So I'll still bring this 3 down. Looking at the first two terms, what is common is y. So y into y minus 4. And then looking at this last two terms, what is common is negative 1. And then I'll be left with y minus 4. Remember, I want for what I have in parentheses to be the same. And if I distribute this, I have to get back this. So I'll finally end up with 3 into brackets y minus 4.